En jy is geskakel op die groot ontbyt, ons Groot FM 90.5 en kyk net, en ons weet nou die skole het gister begin, so die verkeer gaan rof, so kom ons kyk hoe lyk die paaie.
Verkeer. Jy kan ewige vertragings verwag in Pretoria Tuine in Bremer tussen Van der Hof en Staatsartillerie. Andersins ook verkeersligte wat buite werking is by Steve Biko en Soutpansberg, Mansfield en Paul Creer en dan ook Tabosehume en Bloedstraat en Centurion padwerk in Nelmapies rigting oos by Olivenhout Bos, Germiston verkeersligte buite werking by Heidelberg en die N3 en so dan ook by die N3 en in Linksfield in Edenvale. Randburg verkeersligte buite werking by Jan Smits en Bram Fisher en dan in Durban padwerk by die N41 en die N2 Gateway beslaar. As jy weet van enige ander verkeersprobleme of indien van hierdie probleme opgeklaar is, hou ons op hoogte. Die SMS-lyn 49905 R1.50 SMS of jy kan ons tweet @grootfm #grootverkeer.
Baie dankie Hendrie, en dis ook nou hier waar die groot ontbyt so 'n bietjie Engels raak vandag. Welcome to our first guest and it's Shruti Nair and it's a project manager Perpetuity. It's a difficult word for me.
Right.
Perpetuity. And that's property, opportunity. I mean,
It's an amalgamation of all those words, yeah.
that's a big word as well, amalgamation. Just a little bit of background about yourself. You just told us you originally from India,
Yes, yeah.
ending up in South Africa.
Yeah.
When did that happen?
I left India when I was 3. I moved to Holland with my mum for 5 years, went back to India for 2 years, and then moved to South Africa when I was about 11, 12. And my mum met my stepfather in Holland, but because of the laws of interracial marriage, they couldn't get it right. And so we moved here just at the cusp of democracy. So yeah, I'm pretty much South African.
and it's amazing. I mean, people since that time in '94 moved away from cities. We
Yeah.
had a problem with our CBDs that just
Urban
went,
sprawl.
Yeah, that's the thing. But you are now living there
Yes.
and making a living out of it.
Yes.
So what exactly is Perpetuity?
So Perpetuity is a development company that was started by our founder and CEO, Jonathan Liebman. We started early 2008 with one building in the Joburg CBD on the east side. We converted an old bonded liquor warehouse that was actually DF Corlette's offices, and we turned it into a mixed-use space with artists. We got artists in, gave them really affordable space to work from, and one of the few big artists that actually bought into the development was William Kentridge. So that's how we started getting people to come back into the city. We saw the effect of buying abandoned industrial buildings, and we slowly started buying buildings in the area. I don't think we ever saw it grow to where it is now, which is an entire neighborhood, but it has. So we've gone from one building and 4 people to close to 50 buildings, and we're almost on 80 staff.
Sure. Is that
100, yeah.
Arts on Main?
So Arts on Main was the first building we bought, yeah.
I attended a launch in an old theatre. It was
Yeah.
a dilapidated theatre that they used. But someone like William Kentridge, it's a funny thing. There's always artists involved. Even the people now, if you go Braamfontein, even if you go Pretoria CBD, you start with people that you know, it's like an urban lifestyle. Is that a marketing thing, or is it just easier to motivate them?
I think it's an organic thing, and it's quite a phenomenon, because if you look at the narrative of redevelopment or gentrification, it happens when an area offers affordable space for creatives to work from. So artists, pattern makers, sculptors, musicians. And so the creatives come in, then their patrons, the people that actually support them and buy their art or buy their music, start coming in. They're like, hey, well, this is a beautiful area. And then it grows and it mushrooms. And I guess the comparables are New York City, where you've got the meatpacking district, which is the most sought after address, or Shoreditch in London, or certain little enclaves in Berlin, where it's always the artists that come first, and then the guys that kind of fuel them, their patrons, see a viable money-making enterprise and will buy a building or will buy a couple of buildings. And we really, after a while, we strategically started buying buildings, and we now have an entire neighborhood, a densely populated, walkable neighborhood in the Joburg CBD.
So now, how difficult is it if you look at Braamfontein? I mean, what happened there is just amazing in the past 7 years.
Yes.
Is it strong enough so it will spill over to a suburb like Yeovil, or is it still very difficult?
I think any city needs a partnership between private sector and public sector. It's very hard for private sector developers to do everything, to make sure that the streets are clean, the lights are working, security is always around. I think the organic ricochet effect would hopefully spill over onto different areas that are slightly more tricky, I guess. And if you look at Joburg now compared to 7 years ago, every second building is getting a new lick of paint. And there's a lot more vested interest in the city. So I think it'll eventually happen, but it's got to be a mixed income model. So you've got to provide affordable housing, high-end, affordable schools, that's how cities work.
And it's quite amazing. We're going to an ad break now, but I've just seen in Pretoria, going to the CBD, if you take an old flat, some of the guys just painted like the balconies orange. It's small things, but the whole building looks new. I want to speak to you a bit later about funding, because it's also a focus on our show.
Sure.
And just to, how to be an entrepreneur in South Africa. So dis die groot ontbyt, jy's ingeskakel Groot FM 90.5 en ook op Kyknet. Jy kan ingeskakel bly vir jou sportnuus en dan gesels ons verder. As jy enigstens een van daai mense is wat hou van geleenthede, dan moet jy ingeskakel bly. En jy is geskakel op die groot ontbyt en dit is die sport jingle wat jy in die agtergrond hoor, maar ons telefoon het sopas toe nou die gees gegee. Altyd met so 'n tegniese ietsie.
Altyd.
Maar wat heerlik is, ons gaan nie nou vir jou sport gee nie, maar ons gaan aangaan met ons eerste gas en dit is nou vir die ontwikkeling van in die middestede CBD's. En dit gebeur geweldig in Kaapstad, groot gebeur. Ek weet nie as jy enigstens al by die Biscuit Mill was in Kaapstad en as jy ook Johannesburg ken, Braamfontein, heeltemal iets anders as die Neighbour Goods Market, die Arts and Main, selfs Pretoria, daar gebeur geweldig baie goed. Bloemfontein is bietjie stadig. So die Bloemfonteiners kom opportunity. So yeah, that's a problem. We must get someone in Bloemfontein.
Well, we should find us some buildings.
I'm going to get you some buildings. I actually got one lady friend that started a restaurant now, and it expanded so much in what we will call a bad area in Bloem. And now she's using the top building. But just to introduce you again, Shruti Nair, and you project manager at Perpetuity.
Yeah.
What a name. So we discussed a bit, like how you get started. But funding is the big issue.
Sure.
Just to buy a building. And I don't know how banks work. And I mean, you're struggling to get a decent house, because they look at the value.
Yeah.
Is it difficult to convince them, say, listen, this is basically a dilapidated building, but this is what we see? Or is it another means of funding?
Banks in our country, thankfully, they love getting us into a good rack of debt. So if anyone from the small-time homeowner, apartment buyer to developer, can motivate. And in the Joburg CBD, it was quite tough to motivate and say, listen, we see potential in the city that you don't. With different examples, like you just mentioned, with Braamfontein and the different SIDs in the city that are sort of banking SIDs in any case, and a lot of business moving back into the Joburg CBD, the banks would be foolish not to see the potential growth in a city and not dam it to nothing, So it's always tricky. But you've just got to have a core team with you. You've got to motivate well. You've got to harass. You've got to, have beautiful renders. You've got to have a great pack put together. And you've just got to persevere.
You just mentioned about being tricky, but surely there should be other challenges as well, apart from the funding. What would you say the biggest challenge is you guys usually face?
I think if you think that your industry is perfect and has no flaws, you're doing something wrong. You often learn from your biggest mistakes and you know not to repeat them. So it's consistent. It's everything from construction delays or finance delays, and everything will come right, but with certain amounts of perseverance, it'll be fine eventually. In the construction industry and redevelopment industry, you're consistently faced with challenges. And one of the challenges we are facing are things like getting in and out of the city safely, pavements, trees, lights. And those actually shouldn't be things that we should be doing as developers. We're already redeveloping a building. It should be something that the city wants to partner with you on. And we're slowly getting there, but it's taken us almost 7 years to motivate and say, we're doing things to your city that you're meant to be managing. And you now need to come step up to the plate. So actually the stumbling blocks for us is not necessarily finance or construction, because those are viable businesses and they're always issues and they're always there and you're always troubleshooting. But the main issues that we have are small things like signage and security and lights and pavements. And those are all things that you rely on a good relationship with the city. And we have that to a degree and we're working on that to a degree, but it's slow.
A good example, one of my favorite places in Pretoria is Cafe Ridge, and it's on Church Square, and it's been open since 1905. But they use the basement as offices and even corporates, but it's been underwater for the last 6 months. You know, so you're half your business. So you need that partnership.
Yeah.
Would you motivate people to go study before they just jump in, or just if you see an opportunity, just go for it?
It's so difficult to make a sweeping statement like that because every single learner or person with an education or that's fresh out of school or university is different. You need to figure out whether you want to study or you want the practical experience. I didn't study anything to do with property development. Sometimes you land in places that intuitively respond with you, and you don't necessarily need a degree. But also, knowledge is power, right? So learning is a great way of getting to where you want to be as well. It's a bit of a, it depends on the individual. It really does. But a piece of paper often doesn't mean anything. I am not here today because of my degree. If I was doing something prescriptive to my degree, I'd be like painting or, I don't know, taking pictures or building a sculpture. It's all relative.
You missing Cape Town? Joburg?
I actually spent 2.5 weeks in Cape Town, and I have to tell you that aside from the mountain and the ocean and the lifestyle culture, I was itching to get back to Johannesburg. Cape Town's lovely, but it's still just got a long way to go. It's got a really long way to go from a class, race, integration perspective.
Yes. Then the last question. If you look at the CBDs in South Africa, is there one building that you want?
Oh, there's like 20 million. I love the old Carlton Hotel.
I wanted to say Carlton Centre. That was my first
Yes,
thought.
and the sky rink, the roller rink on the top. But we as South Africans were exceptionally lucky. We've got a wealth of architectural architectural stock. We've got every single sort of architectural phase you can think of or genre. So all the buildings are beautiful, from the ugly ones to the classically pretty ones. I want them all.
There's quite an interesting story about the Carlton, that they basically sold it at the same amount that it was worth years ago.
Yeah, they undersold.
Yeah, they undersold it, so it's quite interesting. Thank you so much.
It's absolute
So
pleasure.
we're going
Thank
to come and check out your buildings.
Please
We'll Google and we'll
Please do.
look for you.
Thank you for
Thank you
having
so
me.
much.
Take
That was
care.
great.
Bye.
En dan as jy nou miskien op pad CBD toe is en jy besluit nou gaan ek vir myself daar 'n gebou koop. Kom ons kyk of jy op tyd daar gaan kom.